everybody. Welcome back to Hunt Creative, where today we're going to be using some easy to find materials to make fungus or mushroom scatter terrain for cavern or burrow adventures on the tabletop. Everything we use today can be found at your local craft store or dollar store for just a few bucks. Super cheap, super easy. It's the way we like it around here. First thing we're going to need to do is to get some parchment paper or some wax paper. As you can see, I've got a little square of wax paper here on my cutting board, and we're going to use this to make some hot glue puddles. Heat up your hot glue gun, get some hot glue on hand, and what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze out puddles of hot glue, and the capillary action of the glue itself, or the fluid, is going to form itself into what we're going to use for our mushroom caps. It'll be mostly round, slightly imperfect, and they're going to suit our needs to a T. So you can see here I'm just squeezing out puddles of hot glue onto the wax paper, and then I'm going to let them harden up and dry, and these are going to become the caps to our mushrooms. And I'm just making them in a variety of sizes. You can make as few or as many as you care to. Once the hot glue is dry, I'm just going to peel off the ready-made caps for our mushrooms and set them aside. Sometimes the wax paper will peel off a little bit too, but that's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. Just want to make sure I've got enough of these to fill up the scatter terrain that I want for my tabletop. And there we go. Set this wax paper aside to let the other ones dry. And this is what they look like. Super cool. And I've got some little mushroom-shaped screw plugs for carpentry that I'm going to use as well. What I've done is I've cut an organic shape out of some chipboard, and I'm going to use that for the base of my scatter terrain. Something that'll sit nice and flat when I'm ready to use the scatter itself. I'm going to cut some matchsticks down to be the stems of my mushrooms. I'm not measuring these, I'm just cutting them at reasonably random lengths. I want some long ones and some short ones. Just using a pair of side snips here. And here that's what they look like. They're all just kind of random lengths, and that's okay. I'm going to glue them to the chipboard in kind of a mostly vertical position. A little bit of angling is okay. They don't have to be perfect, and in fact, sometimes a little bit of imperfection makes it look all the more real. Nature never really deals in straight right angles or 90-degree corners, so scatter terrain doesn't have to be perfectly 90 degrees either. Pardon my hair, my bald spot. Just holding them in place while that hot glue hardens. Just takes a second. And I'm just kind of placing them in randomly selected positions here. I want some high ones and some low ones. These could be used for shallow caverns or deep caverns. Could be some underdark terrain, whatever you want. I'm just gluing these little wooden buttons down to resemble smaller mushrooms with thicker stems. A little bit of variety to catch the eye. Blowing on the hot glue to make it cool a little faster. And there we have it. This one's all ready to go. It's going to have 4 different levels of mushrooms on it, if you count the little wooden pegs. And this will provide some visual interest to the cavern adventures and some soft cover for players moving their models around in combat. Just a little hot glue, dab of hot glue on top of the matchstick to hold that mushroom cap in place. And in fact, I like to drizzle a lot of hot glue over top of the matchstick, and it runs down and forms kind of an organic shape, or some pits and hollows, much like you would find in an actual mushroom stem. And we'll see how that looks once we get to the painting stage. And I'm just attaching those mushroom tops onto the top of the hot glue puddle that is running down that matchstick. And I'm blowing on it to cool it down a little quicker so that it'll stick. Pardon my hair and my balding spot again. Just try to get it roughly centered on that matchstick so that it looks kind of balanced when we're looking at it from the tabletop. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be good. And once the hot glue hardens a little bit, make sure those caps are attached fairly well. And then I'm going to drizzle a little hot glue on from underneath to kind of cement that bond between the matchstick and the hot glue cap. Hold it in place a little better, a little more firm. Don't want to add too much here because I don't want to melt it right off of the stem again. But I do want to make sure that the connection is nice and secure. I'm just going to prop it up on the blade of my knife so that it can sit and dry for a moment. And now that it's dry, and the hot glue is hardened, those mushroom caps are nice and secure. Just pull off any hot glue strings that I want to lose before I start the next step. And I got a nice little piece of scatter train. And off screen I made a bunch more. Again with varying heights and sizes of the mushroom caps. I make several pieces, then I can use them in several different situations, and they can represent underground terrain for a bunch of different adventures. Now I'm just using an old crappy brush and some carpenter's glue to lay down a layer of stickiness onto the chipboard bases. And then I'm going to use some fish tank aggregate that I have lying around to just add a little bit of stony dirt texture to the chipboard itself. I'll just take my time and do this to all of my pieces. If you use a brush to do this, make sure you wash it out thoroughly, because when that glue hardens, it won't be very useful as a paintbrush anymore. But this texturing lends visual interest to the base of the mushroom pieces, so that's good too. And in a project like this, I like to make several different pieces because I've got the materials out and I've got the crafting going. I might as well make several, and then I don't have to come back later and make more. This way I have a little bit of variety too. I can pull out a couple for a smaller cavern, and I can pull out lots for a large chamber or cathedral inside of a cave system. And taking the time now makes for a better paint job at the end, so it's worth the trouble. Couple more to go. And once I've got them all textured like this on the base, I'm going to let them sit for a while so that that carpenter's glue can fully dry. We have it, all textured. And now that they're completely, that the glue holding the texture on is completely dry, I'm just going to hit them with a little touch of Mod Podge to seal that aggregate on and make sure that it doesn't come chipping off later. This will also strengthen your terrain because it's going to help keep those matchsticks attached to the chipboard bases as well. And again, you want to thoroughly clean these paint brushes once you're done with the Mod Podge, because if it hardens in those bristles, it's not going to be a brush anymore. Few more pieces to go, and once this is dry, we're going to be ready for the fun step. We're going to start painting these up. Good, one more to go, I think. And we're going to let these dry completely before we move on to the next step. Well, it looks like I want to reinforce a little bit of the gluing of the mushroom cap on one of these pieces. It came loose when I was adding the aggregate. Just a little more carpenter's glue and I'll glue that piece back on. And here I've selected a color palette including reds, oranges, tans, and a touch of blue, and some gray. Squirt it all into my palette and we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to paint the stems and the bottom side of the caps with kind of an ivory off-white color. Looks a little bright right now, but when we hit it with a wash later, it's going to pull out some of the details in the hot glue texture and make them look really nice. Using dollar store acrylic craft paints for this and dollar store brushes. taking my time and making sure that I hit the underside of each mushroom cap and each stem. Couple more pieces to go. And we get to the fun part. Working with color. Just adding a little bit of a gray dry brush to the textured aggregate that we added in an earlier stage. I painted that black off screen just in preparation for this dry brush stage. I didn't paint the mushroom stems or the mushroom caps black because I want the colors to be bright and really pop. Black undercoat can dull your colors slightly, especially if it's a transparent color. And these acrylic paints tend to be a little bit on the transparent side for some of the bright colors. Alright, I'm just watering down a camely brown color, and I'm going to start hitting all of the tops of the mushroom caps with this color. Really start to feel like little cremini or portobello mushrooms at this stage. Almost good enough to fry up and toss on top of a steak, eh? Almost. I don't recommend you eat these. Hot glue is not good for your digestion. A few more to go. Really starting to feel like we've got some fungus. Nice variety of sizes and shapes here. Just coming back and touching up a few where I think the color could use a little improvement, the coverage. I want it to look as good as possible if I'm going to take the time to do it, right? At the same time, I don't want to be too fussy about it. Starting to look really good. I decided after this that I wanted a little more color though. That red and orange is really going to pop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush it on. It's kind of in a starburst pattern coming from the edge inward onto the mushroom cap so that we have hints of color around the rim, but it fades in to that kind of camely brown color in the center of the mushroom cap. I like to layer on several different colors in this way when I'm working on these projects. Just add a little depth of vision to it and make it look cool for the eye. Visual interest is good here. Oh, looks like I need another little glue repair on one of those. Alrighty, and time for a little bit bigger brush, and I'm going with the red this time. So I want the rims to be deep, deep red with a little bit of orange blushing into the brownish center of the mushroom. You don't have to do this, of course. You could paint them any way you'd care to. This is just my choice. Looking pretty good. And I wanted a few different species of mushrooms here, so I'm adding a couple of blue caps to some of them, just to add for roleplay opportunities or story opportunities. They don't really have to mean anything, but adding this now means that I can make up a story around why there are different colored mushrooms, or I could have different effects for different mushrooms, different kind of spores, that kind of thing. Or it could be a quest, part of the quest chain where the characters need to find a specific species of mushroom for medicinal purposes or what have you. And visually it looks nice as well. A little bit of difference in some of the mushrooms adds visual draw to the scatter. And of course, nature doesn't always make everything exactly the same either, so a little bit of verisimilitude as well. And here I'm adding some toadstool dotting to some of the mushrooms. Again, not too fussy, just a couple of little pieces here and there to differentiate some of the caps from the others. This way maybe I can use them in kind of a fey situation as well. And again, more visual interest to draw the eye across the table, right? Just taking a few minutes to add some. Not every mushroom gets them. And just a quick touch up here and there with the camel color to make sure everything's looking good. Feeling happy about this. It's looking quite nice. And here I go with the wash. The wash is going to bring out those stem textures and make them look like they're alive and not just a blob of hot glue on some wood. trying to be careful not to get any of the wash on the top of the mushroom caps because I want those to continue to be bright and cheery. And I don't want to muddy down the work that I've already done. There we go, and I'm coming back in with some vibrant blue after the wash step just to cover up any mistakes I might make and add a little more blueness to the blue mushrooms. Again, just for the eye, just for my own desires, possible story hooks later. What's the difference between a red mushroom cap and a blue mushroom cap? We'll find out. Now that I've completed all the painting, I'm going to hit them with some matte finish Mod Podge to protect them. This is going to do a couple of things. It's going to keep the paint from scratching off that hot glue, and it's also going to unify them into a single piece because I'm going to coat the entire thing, including the underside of the mushroom caps, with the Mod Podge. And once it dries, it encapsulates everything and turns it into a single piece. It really strengthens it up and makes it durable. Couple more pieces to go. Make sure I get them all covered and protected. Preserve my hard work for years to come. It's going to be really nice on the tabletop when they're all dried up and protected. And here we have what they look like, the finished piece, sitting on some terrain. And they're multiple pieces, so I can make fairy rings, or I can move them around. I can use one or two here and there. I can save out the blue ones with the blue tops for a different story. Really nice little pieces. Easy and effective terrain for underground stories. If you find these videos useful or helpful in any way, please feel free to click subscribe or give me a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm and helps me grow the channel. And be sure to come back and join us next week. I think next week we're going to use these very same techniques to make some mushroom folk. So if you have plans for an Underdark campaign where you might run into some myconids or some mushroom folk or fungi folk, check out our video next week on Thursday, and I'll show you how to use these same techniques to make a collection of mushroom folk for pennies. Thanks again for joining me. We'll catch you next time.